Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome back to C-SPAN Arizona Senator John McCain. Good morning, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Steve. It's nice to be back. And with best regards to Brian Lamb. Many people have said that we were separated at birth because of our resemblance. We've done a great job, and so have you all these years, covering the Capitol in a dispassionate and objective fashion.
We're delighted to have you back, and thanks for taking some of our viewer calls. Let me begin with the situation in Iran. The president's response, has it been appropriate enough?
No, it's not been enough. The president is having a full-blown press conference later on today, and I mean, no one could watch the film of the young woman Neda dying in the streets of Tehran without being deeply moved, so I would imagine and anticipate that the president will come out more strongly today.
What advice would you give him?
To follow the example of our founding fathers, who declared that all of us are endowed with certain inalienable rights. Senator Webster, Daniel Webster, who, when the Greeks rose up against the Turks in 1823, and I'd love to get you the full quote, where he said, of course we have. It's our duty to stand up for people who are struggling for freedom. And Ronald Reagan, when he gave the Evil Empire speech, Nathan Shransky said that it spread through the Gulag like wildfire. After the Berlin Wall came down, the people behind the then Iron Curtain said, you were our hope and our beacon. That's what America is. And it's interesting, of course, to see that the Prime Minister of England, the Chancellor of Germany, and the President of France have been far stronger in their comments. And let me clear up again, Steve, I'm not for sending arms, I'm not for interfering, I'm not for anything except for what we have done throughout our history, and that is lend our moral support to people who are literally sacrificing their lives for the fundamental belief that they ought to be able to peacefully disagree with their government without being beaten and killed.
In the 5 months since he's been in the White House, have you had a chance to have private conversations with the president?
Not private. I've had a couple of meetings where there's only one or two other people in the room, but not just the two of us. No.
How's he doing?
Well, I think he has succeeded in getting his agenda through. Unfortunately, it's not a change in the climate in Washington. What it is, and it's been done for a long time, it was done by Republicans. You pick off 2 or 3 Republicans and you get your legislation passed. That's an effective way, but it's not a change in the climate. But most of all, I think he's mortgaged our children's futures. I think he has committed generational theft by laying this incredible deficit on the American people and future generations. We can't. You just had on, just sitting in this chair, is one of the smartest economists in the world. He'll tell you, you can't spend money like this without sooner or later paying a very heavy price for it. Who 5 months ago thought we would own automobile companies, world's largest insurance company, banks, financial institutions, etc., and yet there's no way out. And despite rhetoric, we just passed through the Senate and the House a bill that was supposed to be for Afghanistan and Iraq, had $1 billion, and it's closer to $3 or $4 billion cash for clunkers. What does that have to do with Iraq and Afghanistan? Nothing. It has everything to do with the special interests. And so I'm very worried about the economic impact of this spending on the future of America. That's my great concern. And frankly, our national security around the world, whether it be North Korea, Iran, relations with Russia, in our own hemisphere, there's many challenges.
We'll get to some of those issues in a moment. Our conversation with Senator McCain. Richard is on the phone from Newport, North Carolina. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, sir. Thank you, Senator McCain, for your service. I would like to ask one thing, a couple things, really. But first, when are you going to stand up as a conservative, get some guts in the Republican Party up there and stand up to these stupid people for wasting our money up there? And second, when are you going to pass a bill that at the end of your first term you don't get a full retirement or whatever you've been getting up there, while the rest of us people out here have to work 30, 40 years just to get a half of what we were getting when we were paid?
Well, Richard, I have been standing up, my friend. I'd be glad to provide you with a record of that. I've fought against the stimulus package. I fought against this budget, which is simply out of control, and I will continue. But also I will continue to provide alternatives to the American people in the path and the direction that I think we should go. For example, on health care, I still think we should remove the employer-provided tax benefits to the employees and give every American family a $5,000 refundable tax credit, rather than have a government health care system, which is the path that we're headed on. It's hard to pass bills if you don't have a majority of votes, but I understand your frustration. Sometimes I feel it. The American people's approval of the way we do business here is very low, and I'll continue to fight and serve the country as best I can.
Ken is joining us from Greensboro, North Carolina. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, please.
I have a couple things here. The first is, why is the government continuing to spend money on health care instead of fixing the problems with Medicare and Medicaid before spending this money?
Ken, we'll come back and follow up on your second point. Senator?
Well, the problem is that Medicare and Medicaid, the costs are out of control. The original estimate when we passed Medicare was a very small, and I've forgotten now. I'm sure it's, when we look it up, I think it was
$500 million.
$500 million.
Back in 1965.
1965. Now it's $105 billion, I think, is the number. It's that the costs are completely out of control, and the key to it is competition and better ways of providing health care, as opposed to expansion of an out-of-control system that is now 1/5 of our gross domestic product. Go ahead.
Ken, your follow-up?
The second point was, in view of the favoritism that the unions have gotten with GM and now with the possibility of taxing on health benefits, I find it real interesting that $1.5 trillion, or plus or minus a little, is only going to cover 12 million people with health insurance, which is very conveniently roughly about the same number of illegal aliens we have in the country. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think part of that 47 million, as I understand it, are people who are in this country illegally. But perhaps as relevant to our conversation is that last week there was a Congressional Budget Office estimate report. And by the way, the Congressional Budget Office is generally nonpartisan, that showed that the plan that we are considering in the Senate in the committee, the HELP committee that I'm under, would only insure 1/3 of the uninsured and would have a cost of $1 trillion just for that 1/3 of the 47 million. In other words, 16 million people would receive insurance. If you do the math, if we want to insure everybody, that's $3 trillion. And so far, the Democrats who are running this without any consultation from us, as far as writing the bill is concerned, have not come up with any proposal as far as whether employers would be required to provide health insurance for their employees and what the so-called government option is. So here we're looking at a bill that only insures 1/3 of the uninsured and costs $1 trillion for that 1/3. This is quite an interesting imbroglio that we're in.
You have been to Iraq on how many occasions?
You know, I've lost count, but I would imagine it's 8 or 9 times that I've been to Iraq.
There's an email from James Jennings who says, I served in Iraq. The people there are more concerned about jobs than freedom. Freedom is a luxury for those who are not starving. The people in Iraq are angry because there are too many private contractors and foreigners working while they are unemployed.
Well, the private contractors issue is being addressed, whether it be people who are building things or whether it be the security forces that are provided to, including members of the Iraqi government. I'm sure that there are jobs that need to be created. in Iraq. I am pleased